soldier than it takes to make anything else." "This is new doctrine, Sergeant," said Cap with some spirit. "We old seamen are apt to think that 6 soldiers, ay, and capital soldiers too, might be made while one sailor is getting his education." "Ay, brother Cap, I've seen something of the opinions which seafaring men have of themselves," returned the brother-in-law, with a smile as bland as comported with his saturnine features, "for I was many years one of the garrison in a seaport. You and I have conversed on the subject before, and I'm afraid we shall never agree. But if you wish to know what the difference is between a real soldier and man in what I should call a state of nature, you have only to look at a battalion of the 55th on parade this afternoon, and then, when you get back to York, examine one of the militia regiments making its greatest efforts." "Well, to my eye, Sergeant, there is very little difference, not more than you'll find between a brig and a snow. To me, they seem all alike, all scarlet and feathers and powder and pipe clay." "So much, sir, for the judgment of a sailor," returned the Sergeant with dignity. "But perhaps you are not aware that it requires a year to teach a true soldier how to eat?" "So much the worse for him. The militia know how to eat at starting, for I have often heard that, on their marches, they commonly eat all before them, even if they do nothing else." "They have their gifts, I suppose, like other men," observed Pathfinder, with a view to preserve the peace, which was evidently in some danger of being broken by the obstinate predilection of each of the disputants in favor of his own calling. "And when a man has his gift from Providence, it is commonly idle to endeavor to bear up against it. The 55th, Sergeant, is a judicious regiment in the way of eating, as I know from having been so long in its company, though I dare say militia corps could be found that would outdo them in feats of that nature too." "Uncle," said Mabel, "if you have not breakfasted, I will thank you to go out upon the bastion with me again. We have neither of us half seen the lake, and it would be hardly seemly for a young woman to be walking about the fort, the first day of her arrival, quite alone." Cap understood the motive of Mabel, and having, at the bottom, a hearty friendship for his brother-in-law, he was willing enough to defer the argument until they had been longer together, for the idea of abandoning it altogether never crossed the mind of one so dogmatical and obstinate. He accordingly accompanied his niece, leaving Sergeant Dunham and his friend, the Pathfinder, alone together. As soon as his adversary had beat a retreat, the Sergeant, who did not quite so well understand the maneuver of his daughter, turned to his companion, and with a smile which was not without triumph, he remarked, "The army, Pathfinder, has never done itself justice in the way of asserting its rights, and though modesty becomes a man, whether he is in a red coat or a black one, or, for that matter, in his shirt-sleeves, I don't like to let a good opportunity slip of saying a word in its behalf. Well, my friend," laying his own hand on one of the Pathfinder's, and giving it a hearty squeeze, "how do you like the girl?" "You have reason to be proud of her, Sergeant. I have seen many of her sex, and some that were great and beautiful, but never before did I meet with one in whom I thought Providence had so well balanced the different gifts." "And the good opinion, I can tell you, Pathfinder, is mutual. She told me last night all about your coolness and spirit and kindness, particularly the last, for kindness counts for more than half with females, my friend. And the first inspection seems to give satisfaction on both sides. Brush up the uniform, and pay a little more attention to the outside, Pathfinder, and you will have the girl heart in hand." Nay, Sergeant, I've forgotten nothing that you have told me, and grudge no reasonable gains to make myself as pleasant in the eyes of Mabel as she is getting to be in mine. I cleaned and brightened up Killdeer this morning as soon as the sun rose, and in my judgment the piece never looked better than it does at this very moment." "That is according to your hunting notions, Pathfinder, but firearms should sparkle and glitter in the sun, and I never yet could see any beauty in a clouded barrel." "Lord Howe thought otherwise, Sergeant, and he was accounted a good soldier." "Very true. His lordship had all the barrels of his regiment darkened, and what good came of it? You can see his scutcheon hanging in the English church at Albany. No, no, my worthy friend. A soldier should be a soldier, and at no time ought he to be ashamed or afraid to carry about him the signs and symbols of his honorable trade. Had you much discourse with Mabel, Pathfinder, as you came along in the canoe?" "There was not much opportunity, Sergeant, and then I found myself so much beneath her in ideas that I was afraid to speak of much beyond what belonged to my own gifts." "Therein you are partly right and partly wrong, my friend. Women love trifling discourse, though they like to have most of it to themselves. Now you know I'm a man that do not loosen my tongue at every giddy thought, and yet there were days when I could see that Mabel's mother thought none the worse of me because I descended a little from my manhood. It is true I was 22 years younger then than I am today, and, moreover, instead of being the oldest sergeant in the regiment, I was the youngest. Dignity is commanding and useful, and there is no getting on without it, as respects the men. But if you would be thoroughly esteemed by a woman, it is necessary to condescend a little on occasions." "Ah's me, Sergeant, I sometimes fear it will never do." "Why do you think so discouragingly of a matter in which I thought both our minds were made up?" "We did agree, if Mabel should prove what you told me she was, and if the girl could fancy a rude hunter and guide, that I should quit some of my wandering ways and try to humanize my mind down to a wife and children. But since I have seen the girl, I will own that many misgivings have come over me." "How's this?" interrupted the sergeant sternly. "Did I not understand you to say that you were pleased? And is Mabel a young woman to disappoint expectation?" "Ah, Sergeant, it is not Mabel that I distrust, but myself. I am but a poor ignorant woodsman, after all, and perhaps I'm not, in truth, as good as even you and I may think me." "If you doubt your own judgment of yourself, Pathfinder, I beg you will not doubt mine. Am I not accustomed to judge men's character? And am I often deceived? Ask Major Duncan, sir, if you desire any assurances on this particular." "But, Sergeant, we have long been friends, have fit side by side a dozen times, and have done each other many services. When this is the case, men are apt to think over kindly of each other, and I fear me that the daughter may not be so likely to view a plain ignorant hunter as favorably as the father does." "Tut, tut, Pathfinder, you don't know yourself, man, and may put all faith in my judgment. In the first place, you have experience, and, as all girls must want that, no prudent young woman would overlook such a qualification. Then you are not one of the coxcombs that strut about when they first join a regiment, but a man who has seen the service, and who carries the marks of it on his person and countenance. I dare say you have been under fire some 30 or 40 times, counting all the skirmishes and ambushes that you've seen." "All of that, Sergeant, all of that. But what will it avail in gaining the goodwill of a tender-hearted young female?" "It will gain the day. Experience in the field is as good in love as in war. But you are as honest-hearted and as loyal a subject as the king can boast of, God bless him." "That may be too, but I'm afeard I'm too rude, and too old and too wild-like to suit the fancy of such a young and delicate girl as Mabel, who has been unused to our wilderness ways, and may think the settlements better suited to her gifts and inclinations." "These are new misgivings for you, my friend, and I wonder they were never paraded before." "Because I never knew my own worthlessness, perhaps, until I saw Mabel. I have travelled with some as fair, and have guided them through the forest, and seen them in their perils and in their gladness, but they were always too much above me to make me think of them, as more than so many feeble ones I was bound to protect and defend. The case is now.